Hello and welcome to the Vaults of Terra. My name is Ed and today we will be talking about the Imperium of Mankind. Now this is probably a good place to start in Warhammer 40k lore, as it is the perspective from which the universe is portrayed to the community. Now, the Imperium of Mankind is a galaxy-spanning government that has existed for over 10,000 years and was founded in the 31st millennium by the Emperor, as he was reclaiming worlds across the galaxy in his Great Crusade. Now, these worlds were founded in the 25th millennium or earlier, but had fallen from the galactic stage due to severe warp storms that obscured all galactic travel in that period. Now, today the Imperium is an all-controlling government that is divided into many different sections that I will present to you today in order to give you a good range of knowledge and to help us in future videos identify what people really want to know about. Now, the Imperium has a overarching government controlled by the High Lords of Terra, who act on the will of the Emperor, or what they perceive to be the will of the Emperor, who is obviously encased in the Golden Throne and cannot be communicated with directly, obviously. Now, beneath the High Lords of Terra is the Adeptus Terra. Now, the Adeptus Terra is an overarching term for all the different divisions and departments that oversee the Imperium and control the majority of the human race. These are split up into several main factions, which I'll discuss now, and the first would be the Administratum. Now, the Administratum is obviously concerned with the administrative functions of the entire Imperium. It collects taxes, it does censuses, it supplies humanity with the food it requires to survive. Essentially, the Administratum is the backbone of the Imperium and is designed to help people survive in this grim, dark future. Now, beneath the Administratum is something known as the Departamento Munitorum. Now, this is actually a division of the Administratum, but it is specifically related to the armed forces of the Imperium. Most specifically, it is related to the Imperial Guard, and it provides them with everything from their weaponry to their tanks to their transport. Next is the Adeptus Astra Telepathica. Now, this is the network of astropaths. Now, these are psychic human beings who have the power to communicate over huge distances through the warp, as in reality, communication in the Imperium would be impossible through standard means, because obviously the distances between stars are hundreds of light years, and it would take that much time for a message to travel between the Imperial planets. After the Adeptus Astra Telepathica is the Adeptus Astronomica. Now, the Adeptus Astronomica is related to the Astronomicon, and this is a gigantic beacon that is projected out into the warp. This warp beacon allows the navigators, who we will mention shortly, to guide spaceships through the warp without getting lost in the massive currents and waves that flow through this ever-changing dimension. However, the Astronomicon is rather a grim thing, because although it is powered by the Emperor, it requires 1,000 souls to keep the Astronomicon going every single day. Now, that is a massive figure if you think about the fact that the Imperium has been alive for over 10,000 years. A worrying thought in the concept of human lives. Obviously, it's not a real universe, but still it's an interesting commentary on the usage of humanity. Moving on, we now go to the Navis Nobilite. Now, this is not essentially an Adeptus, but these are a faction of the Imperium who are essentially mutants who are able to see the flow of the warp and direct spaceships using something known as their third eye. Now, usually this is a genetic mutation, but sometimes it can merely be metaphysical, and through this third eye they can see the different shifting warp patterns and allow spaceships to travel vast distances very quickly, or quickly compared to a ship that hasn't got the usage of a navigator. Moving on, we now go to the Adeptus Mechanicus. Now, this is less of an Adeptus, and this is more of an entire wing of the Imperium, because the Adeptus Mechanicus is the arm that controls the technology of the Imperium. Now, the technology of the Imperium is ancient. It is all based upon stuff that has been recovered from the Dark Age of technology in the sort of 25th millennium or earlier. And although it was the height of human achievement, it also caused the age of strife. And so the Adeptus Mechanicus, although they worship technology, they do not allow innovation. And so they have hoarded all the technology in the Imperium and are the sole proprietor and controller of this technology. They are able to maintain and fix anything they like, but they will not share their secrets with the rest of Imperium, because they worship at the feet of the Omnissiah, the machine god of Mars, where the Mechanicus is based. And we will go more depth into that in their individual video. Now we go to the Adeptus Custodes. Now, this is a very small division of the Adeptus Terra, but they have an important role as they protect the Emperor's mortal remains themselves. They are essentially super space marines. They are not quite Primarchs, but they are nearly there. And they have the duty of guarding the Emperor's mortal remains whilst he sits in the Golden Throne. Now, although these are quite a small division, I will hopefully expand upon that in a later video showing how vital their role is. Moving on to our next group is the Adeptus Arbites. Now, despite the fact it's got a rather bizarre name, the Arbites are actually the police force of the Imperium, and they enforce the Imperial law on every world that is under the Imperial control, despite the fact that some haven't even mastered the art of black powder yet. They still are governed by the laws of the Emperor and must do exactly what the Arbite says, otherwise they can come under grave censure, or they can be, in fact, nominated for invasion if they believe that the heresy has grown great enough within this planet. Next is the Officio Assassinorum. Now, the Officio Assassinorum is an interesting division, as it's quite small, but it contains the temples of the assassins. Now, there's many different types of assassin, and we will mention them later on, but basically they are required to hunt down the enemies of Imperium through stealth, as opposed to the usual bludgeoning powers of the Imperial War Machine. And through them, they can end any heresies or prevent invasions before even the shot is had to be fired by a standard trooper. And they are quite vital to the running of the Imperium in that respect. Finally, for the Adeptus Terra, we have the Imperial Fleet. Now, the Imperial Fleet is responsible for all interstellar travel in the Imperium, regardless of whether or not you're an independent trader or, in fact, a captain of a warship. You must be part of the Imperial Fleet. Now, although independence is allowed, it is certainly highly regulated, and in my video on the Imperial Navy, we will see exactly how powerful the Imperial Fleet is. Now, away from the Adeptus Terra, there are other organisations within the Imperium that are noteworthy. The first of these is the Ecclesiarchy, or the Adeptus Ministorum, although they are not technically a part of the Adeptus Terra. Now, these are people who are dedicated to the cult of the God Emperor, essentially worshipping the Emperor as a divine being within the Imperium. Now, they administer all the religious services, officially within the Imperium, and perform many of the ceremonies, including hunting down and burning what they perceive as heretics. Although, obviously, just as in any other period of human history, they cannot always be right, and there is a lot of fear associated with the Ecclesiarchy. It's very similar to the old Catholic Church in its makeup, if not in its actual aims. Lastly, for this independent section, we are talking about the Inquisition. Now, you will have seen that for the Vaults of Terra we chose the Inquisitional symbol for our icon, but it is not really about information that the Inquisition seeks. They are a division of secretive operatives that are based around on the moons of Saturn, and whose remit is infinite. They have the power to do anything in the Imperium, including kill anyone, remove any power, and essentially do whatever they must in order to prevent the incursions of demons, heretics, and Xenos into the Imperium and causing massive disruption. Now, they have, as I said, infinite power, and they also have infinite responsibility, and they don't in fact report to anyone other than the High Lords of Terra and their higher Inquisitors themselves. They usually have retinues of individuals who are highly skilled and can help them hunt down the heretics, traitors, Xenos, etc. with great power. However, they're not limited to merely humans, as they also have several different Space Marine chapters who are completely devoted to the Inquisition and the Inquisition's rules and regulations, although they're not officially controlled by the Inquisition. And this allows for the Inquisition to have a great deal of power in the Imperium, more so than anyone else. They have power over every force, and they have the power to do what they like, so long as it's in the Imperial interest. Right, moving further on to beyond the actual civilian areas of the Imperium, we move now to the military areas, which is what many of us who play the game will know better than all the minor divisions. The best known are the Space Marines. Obviously, I have mentioned them before. They are genetically enhanced super soldiers whose genetic template was created by the Emperor through the Primarchs over 10,000 years ago. Now they are essentially the spear tip in the Imperial arsenal. They do not host invasions. They tend to be all about quick assaults and fast strikes to recover something or to kill an enemy leader quickly, but they are certainly a very complex case, and we will discuss them in more detail later in their video. Next is the Imperial Guard. Now, although they are not as well known as the Space Marines in the lore, They are far greater than the Space Marines in terms of numbers. They have millions of soldiers compared to the Space Marines' thousands, and they are responsible for the majority of the fighting that takes place in the Imperium. They can be situated anywhere on any world in any location, and they tend to be as diverse as the worlds they come from, through which they are either recruited or levied. Now, they can be anything from the very strict regimented Cadians who live on the fortress world in the Eye of Terror, and they also can be things like the Catachans, who are relatively undisciplined but also very powerful Deathworlders who have fought and died for their homeworld many times over. Next, we move on to a division of the Imperial fleet known as the Imperial Navy. Now, without the Imperial Navy, nothing could exist within the Imperium, as they protect the shipping and they host the initial invasions of planets where usually massive starship battles will be fought as the ground forces are deployed to the planets. Now, without the Imperial Navy, there would be no Imperium, but obviously they are also run by the Mechanicum, and all the ships they use are generally based on templates that are thousands of years old. They are all essentially shrines to technology that no longer exists. The ships of the Imperial fleet can range from anything from a ship a few kilometres long and half a kilometre wide to things that are almost tens of kilometres long with weapons that could destroy entire planets. Now, they are quite powerful. However, there is also another division where obviously you can't use a spaceship to crack a nut, so to speak, so we have to go to something else known as the Collegia Titanica, or the College of the Titans. Now, Battle Titans are something that are very rare in the Imperium, because they are almost as powerful as an entire legion of Space Marines. However, they are also a division of the Mechanicum, and require their consent in order to use them. They are massive machines. They are essentially a step below spaceships in their power, and they are required to host many of the invasions of major worlds, and without them it would be very hard to hold some of the larger conflicts that take place. Finally, we will talk about the Sisters of Battle. Now, these are essentially, as I said, warrior women, although it's a little bit more complicated than that. They are devoted, you could say nuns, who praise the Empire through combat and the purging of heresy. They tend to go to places which have been gripped by either independence or chaos, and bring power-armoured women, who are essentially Space Marines in their power, and bring the light of the Emperor, so to speak, to these unbelievers. Now, we'll talk more about the Sisters of Battle in their video, but essentially they are the most powerful force of the Ecclesiarchy, and without them it would be very hard to hold the whole cult of the Emperor together in this day and age. Now I've talked about the military forces and the civilian administration, we shall move on to the actual division of the galaxy. Now, you will have seen the galaxy map in the initial video, and it represents most of the Imperium that exists in the 41st millennium. But obviously, humanity may claim the entire galaxy, but they only control a large portion of it. So now I'll just break down a few of the divisions that exist. Now, Segmentae Majoris is what the entirety of the space ruled by the Imperium is known as, but this is broken down even further into different sections known as Segmatum. Segmatum Solar is the first segment I want to mention, and this is the inner core of the Imperium. This contains Holy Terra, and it also contains many of the populous worlds and most productive areas the Imperium has to offer. It's also the area that sees the least amount of combat that isn't related to chaos, as obviously it's very far from many alien empires. Next, we move on to the Segmatum Obscurus. Now, this is in the northernmost galactic region, if you look at it from whatever angle you like, and it is heavily fortified as it contains the Eye of Terror, and thus is subject to many attacks by chaos and demons. Next, we move on to the Segmatum Pacificus. Now, this is in the galactic west, and it is where the Sabbat worlds are located, so if anyone who is a fan of the Gaunt's Ghost novels or anything else by Dan Abnett, this is where many of the books take place. Next, we move on to the Segmentum Tempestus. Now, this is the southernmost region of the Segmentae, and this is quite a desolate area of space where very few stars are actually born, and it is where a lot of the ancient evils, such as the Necrons, or even areas where races such as the Eldar exist. Finally, we will talk about the Ultima Segmentum. This is the largest segmentum occurring in the galactic east, and this contains the Empire of Ultramar. Now this is a very bizarre place because obviously it's part of the Imperium, but it is also where the Ultramarines chapter of Space Marines controls a very large number of stars, which are all ruled over by the chapter master Magnus Calgar. However, they also contain many threats, obviously due to its size, things like the Tyranid invasions and also the Tau Empire, which we will talk about in their own individual videos. Well, that's the sections of the galaxy, and that's the end of this video. I hope this has been informative for you, and if you have any questions, do leave them in the comments below, and hopefully we'll be back shortly with our next video.
See you next time on Vaults of Terra!